Ready?
Good morning, Rabbi Isai. We are learning Simon Kuf Beis, and I believe we've arrived at Seif Dalet. We're talking here about the halacha that a davar sheyesh lematirin, something that will eventually become permitted, does not become bot. So the Shulchan Aruch tells us, Yesh mi sho'ime, v'lo yishayich davar sheyesh lematirin, heicha she'amachol miskalkel. There is an opinion who maintains that the principle of a davar sheyesh lematirin not becoming bottle does not apply where the food is going to go bad, it's going to go off, it's going to become ruined. We can well understand the reasoning behind this opinion because the basic svara of davar sheyesh lematirin is that eventually you'll be able to eat it without coming onto the bittul. So it makes sense to say that if by the time the heter is going to arrive, that machal won't be fit for eating anymore, then the principle that davar sheyesh lematirin is not bottle no longer applies, and the food will indeed be bottle. The Shulchan Aruch uses the term yesh mi she'omer. You might have come across in earlier seifim that sometimes he uses the term yesh mi she'omer. There is someone who says, sort of sounding like there's somebody who disagrees. We do sometimes find in Shulchan Aruch that he uses this terminology even when there's nobody who disagrees, simply because he only found this in one particular source. Over here, however, there is actually an opinion who disagrees. Rabbi Kiva Eger sends us to the opinion of the Marshal, who says, no, even if the food is going to go bad, it's going to go off, nevertheless, the principle of davar sheyesh lematirin still applies. And he brings a proof from the Shitta of the Rambam, which is going to be mentioned later on in this Seif, where the Rambam maintains that chometz, which gets mixed into your food on Pesach, is considered a davar sheyesh lematirin. We'll look at that a little more down the line. And the Rambam makes no distinction between whether the chometz got mixed into your Pesach food on Erev Pesach, on the first day of Pesach, on the last day of Pesach. We can well imagine that if chametz got mixed into your food on the first day of Pesach, especially with the conditions of refrigeration and freezing which existed once upon a time, by the time end of Pesach is going to arrive, that food won't be worth eating anymore. The Rambam doesn't draw any distinction. So says the Marashal, we can see from the Rambam that even an item which might not still be good by the time its heter is going to arrive, is still qualifies as a davar sheyesh lematirin. However, the logic seems a little bit difficult to understand. Why should that be? And the Sefer Badei HaShulchan, one of the contemporary poskim, he suggests that for sure, even the Marashal is only discussing it to a degree. We're discussing something which, by the time the end of Pesach arrives, most food probably wouldn't reach the stage where it's completely inedible. It might just be not as enjoyable as you would wanted to have it. We might call it roy la'achila al yedei hadachag. That's the gavul. That's the lines of the dispute. The dispute is relevant to cases of something which, by the time its heter arrives, is not going to be so amazing to eat, but might still be at least edible. Something which is going to be completely inedible, everybody agrees that we do not classify that as a davar sheyesh lematirin because it's never going to be possible to eat it. Let's move on now to the Ramah. The Ramah is going to list a number of situations in which the principle of davar sheyesh lematirin does not apply. And I would say, in a sort of general sense, the general idea behind the Ramah over here is that, in the Ramah's view, davar sheyesh lematirin, it isn't simply the fact that this item is going to become mutter one day. It is that too, but it also requires that the item under discussion has some level of chashivus, some level of importance, a little bit similar to the halachas which we learned in the previous simonim about a chaticha ro'elis kabet, about a beria. Things that have certain innate chashivus don't become bottled. So davar sheyesh lematirin doesn't reach that level of chashivus, otherwise it wouldn't be bottled for those reasons. But it also needs to have a little bit of that ingredient. It needs to have some little amount of chashivus, along with the fact that it's a davar sheyesh lematirin. Things which don't have any independent chashivus are bottled, even though they're a davar sheyesh lematirin. I would say that's the klal of the Ramah. Now let's read it and see the details. So, about 5 or 6 cases the Ramah is going to go through where davar sheyesh lematirin might not apply. So he starts out, how the davar sheyesh lematirin ain't a bottle. The principle that a davar sheyesh lematirin does not become bottle. Hainu dafka, this applies only im ha'isur be'en, where we are dealing with an isur which is actually there and still existent. So for example, if we have a yovish be type of mixture where different pieces get mixed one with the other, let's say a person made a neder not to eat a certain piece of bread, and that piece of bread got mixed with another 100 pieces of bread. That piece of bread is still existent, it hasn't disintegrated, it hasn't given off its tam to anything else. We're not just looking at tam, we're looking at an actual piece of bread. Something like that, says the Ramah, that's a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin and does not become bottle. Or another situation, Sheyesh Adayin Mamoshus Ha'isur B'Ta'aruvas. Or at least the case where even if the Isur has somewhat disintegrated, but the actual Mamoshus of the Isur still exists, like maybe a piece of meat that sort of crumbled up amongst other pieces of meat. Avol Tamoi. But if all we are dealing with is nothing but the tam which the Isur has given off, let's say a person made a neder not to eat a certain piece of meat, that piece of meat fell into a pot with other pieces of meat and they were cooked together. So the piece of meat which you've made the neder not to have has given off its tam to the rest of the meat. But you're perfectly aware which piece of meat it is. You recognize it or however else, and you've taken it out. So that piece of meat is no longer there. All we're concerned about is that in my pot, I have now the plater, the tam, which has been expelled from the original piece of meat from which I made my neder, the osor piece of meat. All we have is tam. So says the Ramah, where all we have is tam, there is no principle that a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin is not bottle. It is, in fact, bottle. There's a little discussion exactly how far the Ramah takes this idea. Is it literally only this case where all it gave off was tam? What about if the piece of meat is still there but it had completely disintegrated, or liquid that mixes with liquid, where the liquid which is forbidden completely loses its own sort of independence and character? There is a little discussion how far the Ramah takes it, but either way, whatever the Ramah's personal opinion is, the other poskim, particularly the Shach, disagree with the Ramah's view, and they say that halacha, we don't make any such distinction, and even if all we are dealing with is tam that was given off from a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin, we also apply the principle that a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin is not bottle, and the mixture remains forbidden. We cannot apply the principle of bittul. Now a further case, where the Ramah likewise applies the leniency. Similarly, if we have a situation where the Isur is not because of the item itself, but rather it's because of something that is absorbed within the item. Let's say a person made a neder not to eat meat, and so meat was cooked together with some potatoes.
Let's say not to eat meat for a day.
Okay, for a day, yeah. No.
That's what makes it Davar Sheyesh Lematirin.
No. Let's clarify this point. We're going to come to this later on in the Ramah. All nedarim are considered the Davar Sheyesh Lematirin, because a neder, you can go to the Chacham and be matir it.
Yeah.
Sorry, that wasn't clear, yeah. So, nedarim are Davar Sheyesh Lematirin. So he made a neder, he's not going to have this meat.
Why would it be different than chametz?
Why is there a svara to say that chametz is not a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin? Chametz is a machloikas if it's called a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin.
But a limited amount of time for a neder, why wouldn't that be Davar Sheyesh Lematirin?
No, it's a good case. No, I'm not coming to say it's not a good case. That is a good case, it's true. But I'm just saying you don't have to come onto it. Because even if your neder was a neder forever, somebody was for the rest of my life, I'm not going to have meat, it wouldn't make a difference. It would still be called a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin, since one could go to the Chacham. Yeah. Right, so let's say we have this piece of meat, these potatoes were cooked with the meat from which a person made a neder is not having meat. So now the potatoes contain tam of meat. The problem is not the potato itself, it's the tam of meat contained within the potato. And now the potato gets mixed with other potatoes. Take the potato out from the meat, gets mixed with other potatoes. So now your whole problem is simply tam, which is absorbed within the potato. So says the Ramah, over here we don't have any problem. Something which is not also because of itself, it's also because of something else that's within it, we do not apply the rule of Davar Sheyesh Lematirin. Once again, no, tam, something which is bolua. Over here, it's not. Over here, the point is, it's not quite the same case as before, because before, the bittul is on the tam itself. But over here, the tam is absorbed in the potato, and now you want to be mevatel the potato. It's the potato that needs bittul. But nevertheless, the Ramah still says that once again, it's not a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin, because something which is not really osir. It's only osir because of the tam. We don't apply the principle of Davar Sheyesh Lematirin. It's not really so osir anyway. Yes, he does. The Shach, the Taz, both argue on this case, and they say, bottom line, what's the difference? At the end of the day, the basic svara of Davar Sheyesh Lematirin, instead of eating it while it's forbidden, wait for it to become permitted, it'll become permitted. The basic svara still applies. So what's the difference? In defense of the Ramah, the Pischei Tshuva brings from one of the Achronim who says a very fascinating svara. He says, you know what? We've learned at the beginning of the Simon that the basic principle of Davar Sheyesh Lematirin, that the Chumrah of Davar Sheyesh Lematirin applies only when we have a mixture which is min b'minoi. Applies only when we have two items that are the same min. Without going into how we define min, but the same min. When we have a mixture of things that are different minim, the principle of Davar Sheyesh Lematirin doesn't apply. So says the Pischei Tshuva, let's look at the case we just described. We have the potatoes which contain the tam of the meat. So potatoes with potatoes are obviously min b'minoi. But meat with potatoes is min b'she'enoi minoi. So says the Pischei Tshuva, that since the Ramah's svara is that since the entire problem in the first place boils down to the tam of the meat, true, your mixture is now a mixture of potatoes with potatoes, which is min b'minoi. But the entire problem really boils down at root to the meat. So you cannot have the problematic potato, being more chomor than the meat itself. Meat itself, even if it was a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin, could be bottled in potatoes. So you cannot have your forbidden potato, which is anyway only forbidden because of the meat, being any more stringent than the meat itself. The same way that the meat could be bottled, the potatoes could also be bottled. That's the svara of the Ramah. But al Kolponim, the other Achronim don't accept the Ramah's ruling, and they say that either way, something which contains bolua, which is a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin, also has the status of a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin, and it cannot become bottled.
So if it's a potato that is bolua from another potato, it is another.
Yeah, then you wouldn't have the Ramah's kula. That's what he's suggesting. The Ramah's kula is limited to certain scenarios, correct, yeah. Ramah goes on to give an example of his rule. And therefore, having put down this principle, when we have a piece of meat which was not salted within 3 days from the time of its shechita, where we learned in Hilchos Malicha that such a piece of meat can no longer be salted, but it can be roasted. So it's not completely forbidden for eating. Cannot be salted and cooked in a pot, but it can be roasted over an open fire. We presume that even after 3 days, the fire can still pull out the blood. Just salting is no longer effective. So, says the Ramah, so even though there are some who want to say that such a piece of meat is considered a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin. So if, for example, such a piece of meat, which was left for more than 3 days, got mixed with regular pieces of meat that either have already been salted or have not yet been salted, but they're within 3 days. Some want to say that the problematic piece of meat, which was left for more than 3 days, you would think to say to me, well, it's mixed with another 100 pieces of meat, so it's bottled. Treat them all with the din of the other 99 pieces. There are some who want to say, says the Ramah, that no, that piece of meat is a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin. Why? It's not a classic Davar Sheyesh Lematirin. It's not that its het is going to come after a certain amount of time, but you have a way where it can be eaten permissibly. That piece of meat, which was left more than 3 days, cannot be salted and cooked, but it can be roasted. So it can be eaten in a permissible manner. So some want to say that anything that can be eaten in a permissible manner is called a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin. So some people want to say, you have such a piece of meat, go mix with other pieces of meat, it's a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin. Says the Ramah, I don't agree. Although in essence that might be true, that something that can become permissible in some manner is called a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin, but I say that it's still bottled. Why? Because of the principle I've just told you. Because the entire problem over here is anyway only the blood that's absorbed inside the meat. Nothing wrong with the meat itself. Meat is meat. Very good, lovely meat. It's been shechted properly. Nothing wrong with it whatsoever. The problem is the blood. The blood is just bolua. So says the Ramah, I'm not concerned about this piece of meat, it becomes bottle. Lamaisa, even the Shach and the Taz, who did not accept the Ramah's principle that something containing blios is not called a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin, and they said that it is a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin, they agree that this case of the Chaticha, which was not salted within 3 days, is not classified as a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin. They agree to the Ramah's ruling, Balav Mitame, not from his reason, for their own individual svara. They say their own logic over here, that this is not called a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin. They say why? Because this piece of meat has got two routes it could take. It's got two options. One option is you could salt it and cook it in the pot. And the other option is you could roast it. So they say like this: for salting and cooking, it's forbidden and it's never going to become permitted. So that's not Davar Sheyesh Lematirin. Look at that route. It's forbidden and it's always forbidden. It's never going to become permitted to salt and cook this piece of meat. And roasting is not at all forbidden. It's always mutter. So you have no Davar Sheyesh Lematirin over here. With whichever glasses you want to look at it, it's either also or it's mutter. That's not Davar Sheyesh Lematirin. It's got two possible routes. One route is also, one route is mutter. That's not a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin. So they also agree, la halacha, that if we have such a piece of meat which was not salted within 3 days, which is mixed with other pieces of meat, we do not treat it as Davar Sheyesh Lematirin, it's bottle. One final point over here, which is that the Taz questions the Ramah strongly, and he said, I don't understand anyway, how can the Ramah give this ruling that something which is only problematic because of the Tam is not called a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin? What happened to the case of the Keli utensil, which was Boilea, Tam of Isur, which it's possible to do Hagolas Kalim to, which we learned about a couple of Seifim back, where we learned that it is called a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin. Why is it called a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin? The problem with the Keli, nothing wrong with the Keli itself, the problem with the Keli is that the Keli has in it Tam, which it was Boilea, it's only the blitz. So if you're going to tell me such a principle, that only where the item itself is also, but not where it's also because of blitz, then it's not Davar Sheyesh Lematirin, then you lose the whole discussion about the Keli. So ask the Taz. So the Ramah sort of almost being contradicting himself. Yeah, it's a very good kasha. The place can talk about it. You have to say, you have to go into how all the different cases fit together. To understand that case, you have to say that we look at it with the eyes, none of the blia that's within the kli, because the mice of the bittul takes place is a bittul amongst kalim. It's not bottle because of the blia. If you would have the blia on its own, it wouldn't be bottle because it would be recognizable. It looks completely different to the keli. The sibus habittul, the bittul comes about because of the kalim. So to understand that halacha, you have to say that it's called min b'minoi. We would have to discuss how and if it fits in with everything else in the simon. Okay, so Al Kaponim, as far as understanding the Ramah is concerned, the Taz says that we have to say that the Ramah simply discussed the case of Keli to put down the principle that something which can easily come to a heter, like through doing Hag'olah or the like, something which can easily become mutter by doing some sort of action, is called a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin. He's telling us this case to give us the principles of Davar Sheyesh Lematirin, even though in that particular case of the Keli, it doesn't actually apply. But if you'll find me some other similar case, we'll be able to take principles from there that will apply elsewhere. Okay, let's move on. Another principle, says the Ramah, Kol Isur Sheloi Hoyon Nikar Koidem Shinis Arif. Any forbidden item which was not recognizable on its own before it became mixed. Havi bottle. That item becomes bottle, Afal Pishu Davar Sheyesh Lematirin, even though it is an item Sheyesh Lematirin. The classic example of this is a case which you must have come across even a few years ago already in Simon Shin Chaf in Orach, an important piece of Yoreh tucked away in Orach. The Shulchan there talks about a case of grape juice which flowed out of grapes on Shabbos. You have some grapes which are sort of semi-crushed, and grape juice flows out from them on Shabbos. The basic halacha is that grape juice which flows from grapes on Shabbos may not be drunk until after Shabbos. So it's a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin. But if, for example, you have grapes that were sitting in a pool of grape juice at the bottom of a barrel already before Shabbos, And on Shabbos, you notice that the level of grape juice in the barrel has risen. So clearly what's happened is that more grape juice has seeped out from those crushed grapes into your pool of grape juice on Shabbos. So you'll say to me, oh no, now all my grape juice is forbidden because it's got the fresh grape juice mixed into it and it's a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin. On that says the Ramah, no, that is this case of the Ramah over here. It is permitted to drink that grape juice because the principle of Davar Sheyesh Lematirin applies only to a case where the Issa was at one time recognizable on its own. You could see it at first on its own at one point in time, and then it became mixed. So then we have the principle of Sheyesh Lematirin isn't bottled. But if we have something that was mixed right from the very beginning and never had independent existence, or at least it never had independent existence while it was Asur, then we do not say that it's a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin and we do not have bittul. And it becomes bottled, sorry.
When is the Davar Sheyesh Lematirin after Shabbos?
Yeah. So the grape juice is mutter after Shabbos, so it's a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin.
So the question is drinking the grape juice on Shabbos?
So normally, if it would be on its own, for example, if we just had the grape sitting in a cup, and on Shabbos, juice seeped out of them, you wouldn't be allowed to drink it. You would have to wait till after Shabbos. But what we're saying over here is that if it seeped directly into other grape juice that was already there, let's say before Shabbos, we already had the cup half full of grape juice, and there were grapes at the bottom. And on Shabbos, the level rises. So we know that more grape juice has seeped out. Nevertheless, you're allowed to drink the entire mixture. We don't say it's a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin and it can't become bottle, because that fresh grape juice, which seeped out on Shabbos, never had its own independent existence.
And what if you have grape filled to the top of the cup and there's a drop coming out of the top grape, drips down, gets to the bottom?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
And then it was Nick.
It was Nick. I'm pretty sure that case is also. I think it's even spoken out openly in Aruch.
I'm not understanding the case because
Why?
So it's not Davar Sheyesh. It's not Davar Sheyesh Lematirin. So instead of the Elis local until now, it's going to be bottled by Shishim.
Yeah. No. You still need either Shishim. You still need Shishim. Pashtus. Yeah, you still need the Shea Bittel. It's just not a Davar Sheyesh Lematirin.
Really? I mean, if ice is melting in the water and you don't have Shishim connected, you need Shishim connected the kima that comes out. That's how it has to be. Kima bottle into Shishim.
Pashtus, you should still need Shishim. I think there might be some place where Makel even with Roiv. You have to know why. We have to do a little chazor in the Mishnah Berurah in Orach Chaim to check that out. Okay, so the most of the poskim say that this principle is not just limited to Davar Sheyesh Lematirin. It is you might call international principle. It applies to all the Dvarim Chashuvim which we've learnt about in the recent Simonim, which don't become bottle if their Isur only was Chal, their Isur only came into effect after they're already mixed, they become bottle. They have to have been once also on their own in order for these principles to apply. So one other classic example which they speak of, and then we'll move on. For example, take Oisei ve'es benoi. The Isra of Oisei ve'es benoi. You shechted the mother, you can't shecht the child on the very same day. So if one shechts the mother, the child sitting here in front of me, you can't shecht that child on the very same day. If the child gets mixed with another 100 animals, it doesn't become bottle, because one of the things that don't become bottle is Balei Chai. Balei Chai don't become bottle. Now, what would happen, however, if we know this mother's sitting here, but its child is already mixed with another 100 animals? We know it's got a child somewhere, but it's mixed in this whole herd of animals. And then I go and shecht the mother. So the Isser on the child was only Chal after the child was already mixed. Then we have this principle, the child is bottle, and you can shecht the entire herd on that day, if you would so wish, without concern that you're going to shecht the child on the same day as the mother. Next point in the Rambam. Misha nado midavar echad.
You can check all 100?
Yeah.
All of them? Everyone agrees?
It touches on another sugi, whether you can check all of them or you can check only some of them. Certainly you can check some of them. Whether you can check all of them would actually, you'll learn about it in Kuf Tes. Should we stop here?
You finished it?
Yeah, we've come to a point where we can stop. So, okay. Just say the shkoyach. So we've stopped, but